Okay, so that wrote out. Let's double check the output of that. Let's come into here, open. Here we go. I think it wrote them all out. Okay, cool. Alright, so there's a color. And let's actually do something that's a little fun here. Let's pull out the flow map as well. Update that. Not that it changed anything, but I did overwrite everything, so I might as well. And let's come into here, and I'm going to make a curve. Come back in here. I'm just going to Alt-click on that, and you can Control-V, paste that right on in there. I'm just going to darken those down, because again, this is kind of where the water lines and stuff are. Again, we're using our flow map and our slope map to just kind of set up a little bit more interesting forms on our color map. And let's mult that down. Let's invert that. Let's just see what that looks like here. Maybe a little much, but let's just see. And again, we can Control-J that as well. Just drop that above it just so it does eat right through it. Okay, and I'm going to save this out. Again, this isn't going to have our extra stuff that we put into ZBrush in there, but it is what it is. Don't do that. Let's just save that as a BMP or as a... Save it as a PSD. Fuck it. See if it takes it. Alright. Roadhouse. There it is. Alright. And let's go ahead and drop this on here. It's going to be under texture map. And there it goes. Okay. So again, we can see really clearly how... Let me just put this on to maybe a more flat color. That ain't going to do us any good. Something with the... Nope, not helping it there either. God, that looks just... I hate some of their shaders sometimes. Well, this is what we get. So you can kind of see here how, even though we've sculpted on top of some of this stuff, it still kind of holds up. Now, the next thing that we could probably do to push this a little further ahead is, before we jump into the Quixel stuff, let's go under masking really quick. And we're going to look at the cavity masks, look at the profile of this. I want to, well, let's just hit this and see what this, oh god, I hit the wrong button. Mask by cavity, should take a second. There it goes. And I don't know if you can see it. It's literally masking by the cavity, which is kind of cool. We got some stuff in here that we should probably just smooth out. Let me come back in here with my standard brush, play a little bit around with the flow map here, just so I can, add a little bit of something. Ugh, that looks terrible. Alright, well, you're going to be difficult. As I'm doing a live demo, I will just manually do it by hand with this. There we go. Just kind of break that up just so it looks not so organic, or not that it's not organic, but like it's rock, right? You can do it pretty quickly. Okay, that'll be good. Alright, mask by cavity again on that. Okay. Let's adjust the focal shift on that to like somewhere around there. It's going to get these outer edges here. Yeah, it's a little too low resolution. Alright, scratch that. Alright, I'm going to fire up Quixel really quick. Okay, so here we are. Alright, so this is Quixel. It's pretty powerful. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut on over to CG Textures. Hopefully I'm logged in, and hopefully I have enough downloads left. So what I'm going to do here is I want to get a cool kind of rock face. This stuff's pretty noisy, so I'm going to probably stay away from that. Let's look at some of the arid stuff, see if we can find anything useful. That's not too bad. download that. Our site's been a little laggy, so hopefully we can get something to pop up. And I'm going to download kind of a larger size map. Now, Quixel Suite's super powerful. We could actually probably even just texture everything within this if we really wanted to, because we have a lot of control over everything with it. Where is that? There it is. Come on, give me it. There it is. What basically it allows you to do is there's a number of really powerful, there it goes. A number of really, well, this is already registered. I wonder why it's doing that. Okay. So basically what it'll allow you to do is basically allows you to use a number of really powerful maps to help generate textures and all kinds of cool stuff. So one thing I will do is I'm going to export out a normal map really fast here. Not sure what direction, so we'll just deal with it and see what happens. Take that, put that to here. We're going to call this normal map, an M. Okay. And just for shits and giggles. Okay, it's not going to give me that option. That's cool. Okay. And write that out. Yeah, whatever. Thank you. Cool. It did it. Awesome. And we're going to use the flow map, probably as a curvature map. We could also rip with them correctly if we wanted to actually rip. Actually, you know what? I might as well just do that and just show you guys the process of doing that. This will take a little longer, but that's okay. We're going to deviate a little bit. I'll probably actually do that after I do the normal map photo conversion stuff. So let's come back into Quixel here. Oops, cancel you. I'm going to go into undo here. I don't know why it's having me re-register all this stuff. Hold on for one second. Alright, that's all registered. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my... Oh, that's killing it. Down here. Get this rock. Okay. Now, so this has a number of really awesome things it can do. What I want to do is I want to go into this map converter. And I just want to get a height map for right now. Just click Active Dock there. And this is running a bunch of Photoshop scripts on here. And again, you notice I'm just letting it run and do its thing. Don't play with anything. Don't touch anything in Photoshop. Just let it do its thing. It's going to run a bunch of different things on it. And again, just like anything, the larger the map is, the longer it will take. Okay. So there is this guy here. And again, if we were to adjust the photo normal presets, we could have gone in and changed some things a little bit. We can actually go into each of these sliders here and adjust. Like right now I'm adjusting the finite grain detail. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if you're like kind of like, holy hell, this looks pretty powerful, it is. So I'd recommend playing around with that a little bit as well. But anywho, I'm going to just take this back out. I'm going to get this back into the ZBrush so we can kind of stay focused just a little bit on this. And I'm going to go back to my standard brush. I'm going to import a new alpha. Take our displacement map. Oop, this is way too big. That's okay. We'll see if it doesn't crash on me. And if it does, I'll just down-res it. Turn on our radial fade a little bit. There we go. And again, we don't have a ton of polys here. You know, I mean, we got some, but it's still going to be pretty pixely. So let me Control Z that. Just the Z intensity. And let's just take this up another notch. Now, I'm recording. I'm running a bunch of stuff in the background. So, not great. Not a great workflow, to be honest with you. So another thing too, if you're doing this, oh gosh, look at all those pockets. Have to clean those up. If I was doing it in production, I'd clean them up, but probably not for this. Okay, that's pretty good. And again, I'm just actually, let's get a little bit more depth into that. Let's reduce a little bit of the surface noise on this as well. We'll come back into the alpha adjust. I'm gonna bring this guy up just a little bit. There you go. Oop, I'm going the wrong way with it too. I'm gonna go out. Still a little noisy, but you know what, in some cases it may not be such a bad thing. Let's see. You just turn down that fine detail. There we go. And actually I'm going to do this for this guy. Image size so ZBrush doesn't die. Put this down to like 1500. Save as. Displacement map. Oh, one. Alright. It will import that. Okay, that's much softer, which is nice. Just all that finite, noisy stuff we want to be careful with. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. It just depends on what you're doing with it. Remember the alpha curve, but I won't remember to have the radial fade stay on. Oh, ZBrush. And again, I'm just going to put this in some areas. I don't want it going everywhere. And zoom out while you're doing it, like so you can kind of be a bit objective about it, right? You're like, oh, this is kind of cool. Again, we're not concerning ourselves with super finite, noisy detail here. We just want kind of medium to broad strokes. Because again, if we turn that texture map back on, texture map on. Okay, you can see how far we're getting with just color, right? So you can really kind of get a lot from not doing a ton. Just kind of put some more transitional detail down here. Okay, and for right now, we could obviously keep going on this, keep playing with it, and keep adding stuff. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want to get this thing out so you guys can play with it. So we'll call it good about here. Just kind of get this little build up here around some of these bases, just some of these transitional areas. It's nice to have some smooth areas as well. But you know, just looking at some of the photos, reference and stuff, you're going to see these kind of areas where the erosion and stuff is going to take hold. It'll kind of pull stuff a little bit more, in particularly on a lot of these slopes. So just keep that in mind. And again, we have all these other alphas here that we can kind of pull from and play with if we wanted to. And if we want to go in at any point, and again, just make sure you're out of perspective mode. You're going to do this. You know, you can go in and add, extra little peak or something in there. Not that you can see it because the intensity is too low, but it's way too high there. That looks great, Dave. Demo A1. Let's do a little incremental save there. Especially when you get around this poly limit, you're pushing a lot of detail. This might even not save all the way. Okay, it did. But just be mindful, like 16 mil on a 32-bit system, or not 32-bit system, but 32-bit software. Thank God they're getting away from the 32-bit. There we go. Just adding just some different volumes and stuff. I don't know. It looks a little weird to me. Looks kind of. See what that does here. When I pull that out, I think it's going to remove all that kind of cool ridge, though. If it's not a big deal, we can put it back, but. Just Control Z, Jew. Thank you. And again, since this is, we want to get this thing so it's straight. There we go. If we were doing this in Projection Master, it'd be a little easier. See, there you go. It's something nice and subtle. Right? You don't need to go, you just kind of have to feel it out a little bit, like, yeah. And it just adds, right? It, a little bit of the silhouette breakup's nice. It kind of takes away a little bit from, actually, yeah, that's a little weird, actually, for that kind of rock formation. Screw it, we're going back. There we go. Alright, we'll export this. I'm going to export the high res. This is going to be a little bit of bonus for some of you game guys, and for even some of you non-game guys. Like, this is pretty useful. So we're just going to MTA. And this is a huge-ass mesh, so just let it go. Wow, that went way too fast. Why did it go so fast? Yeah, my ass that wrote it. Yeah, it's like, that didn't happen. Uh-huh. Oh, ZBrush is in a bad state. It's not writing out the outputs to the disk correctly. So I will get this thing to export, and then I'll chime back in just a few. Alright, just so you guys know, if you need to export something like a high-res mesh out of ZBrush and it's giving you a bit of a hard time, you can come under here under UV map and delete the UVs. It'll make the OBJ smaller. It doesn't actually store the UV data with it anymore. It actually literally wipes it. And since you're going to be ripping from a low to high, you don't really need it. So really quick, what I am going to do though is I'm going to I've already exported the high res, so I'm just going to duplicate this guy. Hopefully it doesn't crash on me. Very well could, because I didn't delete the UVs like I said I would. Alright, let's take this guy, come down to here under UV map. We're going to delete those UVs off him. Actually, you know what? I don't really want to do that. Actually, you know what? We'll just do a straight decimation off this guy. Let's see. I mean, it's a straight projection down, so it's not that big of a deal, but I wanted to see if I can retain the UVs. This might actually cause it to crash out and die, though, so we'll find out. So I'm going to run decimation on this guy, and then I'll spit him out as the low res, and then we'll use him to rip a bunch of maps off. We'll look at some of the Quixel suite stuff, and just in terms of getting like kind of micro detail-y stuff out of it, and then that should be pretty much the wrap up for this. We'll talk a little bit about the shading and texturing stuff as well inside of Max, and then we'll do some low-level detail stuff, and then that'll end the lecture. So yeah, I'll decimate this guy down and chime back in just a second. Okay, so decimated this guy out. It's about 3,000 or so triangles, so we'll just use that for right now. We come in here, and let's clear all of this out. We don't need that anymore. We'll remove that. Remove that. Okay, I'm just going to do this with X normal here. I'm just going to be ripping the curvature, curvature, cavity, derivative, normal, object space, normal. So we'll go ahead and add the high res, and I actually added the high res into the low res slot. I got to change that. Don't render that; it won't work. Add this low. Okay, baking options. Come up here. Desktop. We're just going to call this MT for mountain. Okay, and we'll do our normal, our AO, cavity. Okay, that should be okay for the cavity. Yeah, that should be okay for the cavity. We'll find out. I want a derivative map so I can do some things with color just in case I want it, as well as a curvature map. And yeah, let's fire this off, and then we'll come back on in just a second. Okay, and that concludes our demo. We're done. I'm just kidding. No. So I want to talk a little bit about what I ended up doing here. Obviously, this has jumped off significantly from where we last were, where we were ripping all the maps. I'm going to show you what I did. I'll talk a little bit about this. And so there's a number of things. Like, again, we're going to go into a couple different styles of rocks. This is much more of just like kind of the standard World Machine heavy erosion. So we got like these super long stringy things, and those are kind of cool. Those look, depending on the look you're after, whatever, that's what you're after. We don't have any prop distribution done. There's no little pebbles or anything. This is all just one. It's the same mesh duplicated over and over again and rotated and spun around. So let's look a little bit about what I did here. When it came for render time on this guy, I probably janked these up to about 8 for the render settings, but that's not really what I'm assuming you guys are interested in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back into Photoshop. I'm going to close down pretty much all of this stuff. I rendered out a bunch of passes, but we're not going to really be covering the rendering portion of this. And I want to talk a little bit about the maps, if I actually remember what I named them. I'll look a little bit at the normals and all that kind of stuff as well. You know what, hell, I'll just grab everything. There's some duplicates in here of other maps and whatnot, but we'll talk about. I'm just going to adjust the layout here. Show all? No. Show none. Arrange. Let's just do. So 6 up does. Okay, cool. Now we still have some that are lying over here, so I'll jump over here between these. So the first thing we have is we have our flow map out of World Machine. And actually, let me fire up World Machine here because I closed it down because I was working on the next section that we were doing. Open this guy. And I believe it was this guy. Let me check the date. Yeah, we're down here. We're at the demo. Okay, so we have our color map, which again we spit out as we took our combiner, slug slope. There's that. Erosion's got this pumped into here. We take this as a colorizer. Up, pipe this back out into here. And it'll just get that arid look again here. Yeah. So again, we took it right out of the height field, put it into a colorizer, we spit it out as a bitmap. Okay. Now, on top of that, I did another thing. And let me remember what it was called inside of Max here. Demo color A. We'll actually just look at this guy. I took this color map. I'm going to bring this guy forward. And over here in my little layers palette, I took our. I'll just step right back through this. Took our initial. I did initial curves on the flow map, which again the flow map comes out of your erosion node right here. There's this little dot here. It says flow map, and you spit that back out. Black and white's fine for it. Did a hue and saturation adjustment just to kind of bring out the colors a little bit. Then I took our AO and I did a mult on top of that, and drove the same curves layer back on top. And then I added another color layer using this guy here. And that's just it's a slope mask that I just pulled out and did a little bit of levels alteration too. Now, the thing about World Machine and its texturing stuff, even if you guys are doing this for in-game or pre-rendered or whatever, you're really after these masks. More so than, I mean, the normal map stuff's important, of course, because you can do some really cool stuff to call it curvature. But essentially, what you end up doing for a lot of your game stuff, and I'll actually try and replicate this inside of Max here, because Max is going to be a little difficult to do this, but I'll show you it here. Yeah, I know. I messed up. Yeah, the DLL, whatever. Alright, mix. Okay, so I'm going to go to bitmap. I'm going to find one of the flow maps, which I'm sure I labeled correctly because, I've been doing that this entire demo, so why the hell wouldn't I do it now? Because that's just, effective workflows. There it is, demo flow A. Okay, so as we're looking at this guy, this is our mix map. This is what we're going to tile everything over. Now, and again, this is important. It depends on your landscape and what you're looking at here. For most of the sedimentary stuff, it tends to be a gradation, which goes straight up. But for this, I'm just going to show you guys what the coloring looks like. And I'm just going to drop this guy on here and let you guys see this. I'm going to pop over here into Max land. Okay, now even at its largest resolution, if we wanted to use this as is, we're not going to get a ton of resolution. Now again, this is a viewport displaying Max, but it's the same general principle. The point I'm trying to make is you're never going to get enough resolution out of this mask to drive anything. Nothing. Like, it'll just be good enough to be what it is. It's a mask, right? Unless you're doing something at a distance, I should say. Like, there's obviously always caveats, because at a distance, depending on what you're doing, our little friend here could actually be really useful, because you're just going to read the color information. You can tile like a noise texture over it as well if you wanted to, if you're doing something at a distance. So essentially what we'd want to do, and again, World Machine, again, this is important. World Machine's a straight down projection on everything, so your UVs are going to stretch because it's a planar projection, right? The surface was a plane, right? It's been displaced up. Okay, so when I go to grab a rock, which is going to basically be channeled through any of the black spaces, we'll do something like this. That way we can see the stretching. It's a straight down projection, right? I'm going to put that to like 8. Okay, that's what's going to happen by default in World Machine. In these kind of situations, you really need to get into triplanar texturing, and we're actually going to use a plugin from Neil Blevins. I'll show you when we do the next landscape to show you more about that. For this kind of eroded mountain surface, though, when I was originally going through and building up the shaders, I, applied this same principle, this masking principle here, where I was going through and applying various, just swap that, adjust the tile rate as well. So, and again, you can see, again, let's try and beef this up. It's going to be in the viewport, so it's not going to look great. But you can see how much you actually have to tile these maps. And these maps aren't necessarily small. I mean, this is like a 3K map, right? Let me see. Yeah, it's a 3K map. I mean, it's definitely not small. And it's going to get all noisy in the distance, right? Which isn't really great, especially if you're doing landscaping or landscape style stuff. Like I showed you for the demo, open you back up. For something like this little test scene here, I really can get kind of away with, I don't want to say murder, but yeah, murder, essentially. I can have quite a bit of stretching on this, and you're probably not going to notice it, especially because there's so much surface detail and breakup. So what I decided to do was I went in and, let's see here, Max. I don't want to open the slate editor because it's going to be a bit harder for you guys to see. Oh, thank you for not showing the entire thing. I made essentially a composite node. Okay, what this composite node is think of this as like a PSD inside of 3D Studio. And you can get to it just how you'd get to all your other shaders. It's just a composite shader. It just literally says composite when you go into your bitmap node. So it'd be like right here, you click, and then there it is, composite. And it's going to look like this when you first open it. You can add layers here. You have your texture control, you have color correction control, and you have your masking. And so for the first few layers, the first few layers, I set up this exactly how I would set it up in Unreal, minus the channel texturing, because that's a pain in the ass to do inside of 3D Studio. It doesn't really work that well, to be honest. I have a multiply, which is my AO node, or my AO map, sorry. I have this texture, which is a color dodge. You can either color dodge it, overlay it, whatever. I really just want the color. And even, let me see what happens when I overlay that. Yeah, it's just going to darken it a little bit. That's why I think I went with the color dodge, because it lifted it. After that, I have, if I look into here, I have my mask PSD. And that's a combination of the flow map and a selector map that I made. And again, I didn't show you guys in the video. I showed you how to pull the selection map. You can see it there. And inside of Photoshop, I multiplied the flow map over the selection map and the height map and clamped it and did a bunch of things just to kind of get the look that I was wanting, right? A little bit of color correction there to boost the contrast so things kind of stick together. For these kind of stringier things, I tend to use a lighter color. So like there's like a light sand, and you can kind of see that a little bit in the photo. It's subtle, but it's there. The displacement's way too high in this, but whatever. It's for the demo. Then again, we have underneath that as an overlay, I have just a breakup map. Like this guy is actually, I'll show you, this is actually really useful. This is for my edge enhancement, and you can actually see this edge enhancement working kind of everywhere. And this is really cheaply done. I actually worked with a guy, I'm not working with a guy right now. His name's Joseph Jingles. He showed me this really awesome technique, and I'll show it to you guys as well. Hopefully it doesn't get too mad, but it's super useful. So basically it requires you to generate a normal map. I think this is a world space normal map, but you can do it off of any of them. Really, it doesn't really matter, because what you're really just trying to do is get your edge enhancements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this red channel, new layer. I'll put it up there. Paste it in. Again, it's not, I didn't paste it in the channel. I pasted in an actual layer. So I pulled from the channel, pasted into the layer. Come under filter or layer filter, stylize, and we're going to come here and hit emboss. Set that angle to 0. Now, be really careful with this height, because a little goes a long way. So we're going to probably be around, yeah, 2's fine. Oh, yeah, a little. 2's probably fine. Okay, and we're going to leave that angle at 0. Turn that guy back off. Come down here, grab the green. Copy that back out. And I'm Control-Xing and Control-Zing just so I make sure I get the exact cut that I want from the channel. Sometimes Photoshop, especially when you have a bunch of shit open, doesn't do that well. So I kind of hit it with a hammer. Again, filter, stylize, emboss. This time we're going to change the angle. You can go positive or negative 90. It doesn't really matter. You can see the difference here. It doesn't really give a shit. Like 90. Oh, no, negative 90, sorry. Did I do that right? Yeah, negative 90. And then turn this to overlay. Okay, this looks like a damn mess right now, but it's actually not. It looks like a mess because of A, how far I'm zoomed out, and B, it's kind of going all over the place. But basically what this is this is all my edging, okay? So back inside of Max or whatever program you're using, you do this on Unreal You can embed these masks and stuff inside a channel mask. Otherwise, you're going to have way too many maps. But anyway, I set that to an overlay. That's at 50%. And again, I kind of went a little hog wild here with the maps. Again, you can see like you can have as many of these composite. Well, I don't say as many. There's a limit, but you can have quite a bit of these composite layers. I have another texture set to normal, and this is kind of where all the rock facing stuff happens. It's kind of in this lower chunk. And I took the mask. This is a combination of Photoshop, doing a bunch of stuff with the actual height map, and the slope and height selectors inside of World Machine, spitting those out, playing with them in Photoshop. We'll come back out here. All of these maps are tiled like crazy. Well, not these ones. Where is... Oh, no, they're just rotated. A couple of these guys get tiled pretty heavily. That's you. Yeah, so twice. I mean, and they're big maps, right? These are like 3K maps, which is kind of overkill for what I needed. But it was easier than down-resing my source library, so I just used it. I added, again, a couple more layers, playing with just the general masks. And then underneath this, I have our source guy, the guy I played with in Photoshop and did a bunch of alterations with. Now, couple things. This method takes a long-ass time to render. It's primarily the composite node. It's not great. So just note that. I'm going to do a low-res render here. There we go. I'll just throw... now, this isn't the high-res one. This is just the straight color map. And again, you can see that this straight color map gives us a lot of information. Like, you can go really far with it. In fact, you know, again, depending on what you're after, I'm just moving this guy over here as this thing's rendering, because, you know, why not kill the computer as I'm recording? Depending on what you're doing, this might be totally cool and totally valid for you to use. Now, again, this isn't really displaced that heavily, so let me show you the slightly heavier display. So I'm going to do this in viewport, so it's going to bring max to pretty much its knees. But you can see, actually, put this map back on it, so you can see it there. I'll put this up at 8. Let that sit for like 2 minutes. I should probably just put that at 4. That's okay. Let that sit for a second, and I'll pop it back in so you guys can see. Okay, so 8 was stupid, and it definitely crashed. But so this is just a straight like tessellation of the plane, and I just displaced it straight up. But with the color, like the straight colors, you're not getting any of the UV stretching, okay? And this is always the thing that I think kind of messes people up when they do World Machine stuff, is they're like, how the hell do we texture it? We're going to cover that in the next lesson. But for this, since this is such a useful technique anyway, I did want to cover it. And this is also going to bring me into one last max point before we jump into the next World Machine section. And I want to talk about particles and how important these flow maps actually are to these particle sims. So what I've done here real quick is I have... we'll just set this back to 0 because apparently I have my head up my ass. Sorry. Oh, that is one thing I do want to talk about. If you decide to rip your stuff out of ZBrush, let's say you sculpt back on your stuff and you're, you know, doing your whatever, and you export it, and you decide to, you know, use like a low res mesh out of there, remember your ZBrush is going to flip your UV, so any maps or flow maps that you generate inside of World Machine are going to need to be flipped, or the ZBrush maps are going to need to be flipped. Either way, just know that, or your UVs are going to need to be flipped in your object. Just remember that little caveat. Sometimes it messes people up. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I want to show you guys the World Machine and a little bit of the particle systems here, because the particle systems are super powerful inside of Max. They're powerful in most programs at this point. So I'm going to click on Particle View here. And what is this? Particle flows. Okay, and let's make sure this thing's still okay. Cool, it's working. All right, so what I want to do is I basically want to tell Max to go in and spawn a bunch of particles on this object because, you know, as cool as one of these images look by themselves, they're not done, right? Like this isn't. You know, we want to add a bunch of stuff on top of this, right? Like this guy's, you know, it's cool. It just demos, you know, the world machine stuff and my shitty compositing. But I'll show you also what the raw image looked like before I started playing with it. Right, so there's the raw image, which actually probably looks better than... Yeah, it does. Jesus. Alright, I'll work on that. Whatever. Just do this. There we go. No. I just need to get the sky back in there. Really messed that up. And then we'll just do this. Exposure that up, blow that sky way out. And just have it work on that. Ah, that's better. Somewhere like that. And the world spins onward. Okay, anyway. You know, it's a cool image by itself. Like, the displacement looks awesome or whatever. You know, looks okay. This doesn't look too great, but it really wasn't designed to get it that close. But there's a bunch of things missing. Like, you know, he's missing the rocks, the pebbles, the plants. You know, so how in the name of God do you get that stuff to distribute, right? Because doing this by hand, and again, on this guy isn't that big, but on some of these terrains it gets really large. You just doing it by hand just doesn't work. Can't really do it. So what I end up doing is I use particle scattering inside of Maxie's the grayscale stuff, or grayscale masking to do it. So what I have here is I have just, again, this TIFF, and let me actually go back into this shader over here. Where are you? Let me grab. Remember what's the name of this dude? Not you. Let's use mask 5. And I want to get something that, mask 4, fine. Something that's clear enough that we can actually see this thing. So what's going to happen is I'm going to scatter a bunch of rocks, essentially. They're going to be spheres, on these on this object. So the first thing that I need to do is come into the particle view. And again, particle view, you hit that button, it opens it up. I want to grab a position object. So right here, put this at the top of the chain. I'm going to delete that. Select this position object. Click Add. It's going to add this as an emitter. Okay, can't see anything really happening though right now. Okay, you see him falling through the floor. Turn the speed down to absolutely nothing. Okay, what this is basically going to do is it's going to say, hey, go over the object. Now what we need to do is we need to say, hey, position object, actually I want you to actually be based off the material. And then where you're not there, I want you to delete the particle locations, okay? That way we don't waste a bunch of stuff. And now I'm going to say, because we need a lot of rocks, I'm going to go something like that. Okay? Now again, this is right now displaying as ticks, so I'm going to take that off. Okay, we can't see anything. Okay, but they are there. So the next thing we want to do is we want to, well, actually, I guess we could leave this display node in there. So displays geometry. Ta-da! Okay, we have a bunch of cubes. Everyone is absolutely ecstatic. And we're going to adjust the scale here, and we're going to add a little bit of variation. Okay. Now this will retain, obviously, any object location. So if you want to do shape instancing here, you literally drop in a shape instance and select your object. Okay, and you have all these options here to deal with scale variation. Give you an instant. It'll give you information on object statistics and all of that. Rotation as well. The scale and the variation are important, though. You want to play with this because obviously you want these things to look realistic, so you want to adjust the scale of these guys. And the size, again, believe it or not, smaller tends to be better. So when you're doing this, you're going to be really dealing more with object count and really small things. Like, let's make sure the, I'm going to tell this thing to be at 50% for the display. And I'm going to literally double that. Okay. This is a lot of particles. So I'm going to just render this guy, and again, this is referencing this material. Okay. If you want to do multiple materials, you can, because right now it needs a material to actually drive what the color is. Under the position object right here, where it says grayscale, you can use a sub-object, which means you can use multi-sub-objects inside of 3D Studio Max. Okay, so again, as you can see, like, and I actually, before the video was paused, I actually went in and like added an extra like 4,000 onto this. We probably realistically need to be like higher. We probably need to be probably around like 25 to 35,000 particle points, maybe more. It can get really heavy really fast. Some other interesting things to tell you to keep in mind on the position object, surface offset is going to raise and lower the object. Okay, so again, it's really useful, and again, this stuff will correspond as well to the flow maps as well. So let's actually take a look at that guy, because that should be a little different. And again, you see it hasn't updated yet, but if I start to scrub this guy, if my computer doesn't crash, those particles are going to be distributed. Okay, and again, it's really stringy, so it's going to kind of look like they're going everywhere, but they're actually following the flow map. You can kind of see it through there. And again, we'll throw it on something a little bit more extreme. Yeah, here we go. Throw them all at the top. Okay. And this is really good, again, for selling object scale. Retrospect, I probably should have rendered out my little demo painting, but with it on there. But again, you can even see, like, if you just kind of imagine this with a little bit of these rocks in there, it'll help a lot. Also, just to talk a little bit about the shader that was on there, I did use the normal map as well. It was just a V-Ray normal map. So, or not a V-Ray normal map, just a normal bump. This actually didn't do anything for it, so I shouldn't have left it in there, but there's the normals. Okay, and that's again just to add an extra level of detail onto the object. So, when you're setting up for, I call them like the gradient shaders, it's more of a gradient base, to take away, especially out of World Machine, you are mapping for, well, I mean, we're in Mac, so I'm just going to call it Z up, but for every other normal 3D program, that's pretty cool looking. Look at that. Look at that. It's like some Avatar stuff. So just rotate the model. You were mapping from Y up.
Okay, what does that mean? That means you're going to get stretching in your UVs. Things that hide it are going to be your color maps. It means you'll also get stretching in obviously any bump map, any photo-based image that you end up using. So keep that in mind. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys. I'm not going to walk you through. I'm going to walk you through some of the funner builds of this guy because there's some new nodes that I want to talk about. But we're going to come in and show you guys a new shader, new way of working, not a new way, but some more interesting things inside of World Machine. And then we're going to talk, we're going to use a plugin from Solburn Scripts from Neil Blevins, which is essentially triplanar projection to help give us more defined textures. And we'll talk about how to set all that stuff up. And yeah, so pause the video and we'll come right back. So here's that concept taken on just the grayscale of the model. Max actually just shit itself and died. Move the composition a little bit around for this, but again, the particle distribution on very low res pieces of geometry. I used a rock generator here. Let me pull that up. Rock generator 3ds Max. And I pulled that right off a script spot. It's actually done by this guy. I'm not going to remotely attempt to say his name, but I'm going to butcher it. Alessandro Ordolano? Anyway, really awesome script, super useful, and again, was really helpful for getting this out. And again, you know, let me just pull up the other image here, just the color one, so you guys can kind of see it. And again, the color one, the composition was a little different. It was just a subset of this. So just toss this guy on top. And obviously it was substantially smaller. I didn't realize that. Oh well. There, let's do it this way. Here we go. Just kind of line it up roughly so you can see. And then you can actually see the composition change as well, so you know I'm not BSing you, but it's really more just to prove a point. I just don't want that shift to be so jarring. You know, it's screwed, whatever. It's close. But again, so again, we have all that color information. Totally, you know, again, saw the shader. The shader was probably a little bit more complicated than what it needed. But that's where we're at with it, right? So again, obviously the guy on the left got shifted a little bit. And we're a little wider. But, you know, the point here is that it's a lot of little things. And if you guys decide to, you know, it's basically, you know, it's not just one solve all, right? And again, rocks and rock formations are very complicated, actually. They're not simple. These things make it drastically more simple than it used to be. But it can be really powerful. And if, you know, you use it, you know, if you use it in conjunction with like 3D Studio or whatever modeling program you get, you start to get really believable scenes. These guys are actually probably a little big, the stones here. We're kind of making things feel a little smallish, probably maybe half that size, maybe. But again, you know, it's one of those things that you do a render like this, and it's good to do a black and white render like this, by the way, just from like an environment standpoint. Like, I always forget to do this, and always halfway through the painting, I'm like, I'm a fucking idiot, because I always regret, like, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just look at the lighting, right, and just see the lighting composition a little bit like this. You know, I could make this even a little bit more dramatic. This is probably a little too realistic. And I mean, inside of Max, this is just a single spotlight with a gray shader and V-Ray shadows on it. And doing that displacement method that I showed you guys. And there's a normal map on it as well, just for the finite details. And I think for the tessellation on those, this is at like level 6. But this is pretty much the end of the first part for the world machine stuff. Then we're going to get into a little bit more advanced stuff. Not so much advanced. I don't want to say advanced. This is all pretty much the same difficulty, but just some different things. We're going to do a little bit more shearing, more kind of like glacier face stuff. We're not going to. We'll try and get a little closer to, I think, some of the stuff that you guys would like to see a little bit more of, which are the flat cliffs. And then we're going to actually explain, like I said, using Neil's method of doing the triplanar projections for help setting up some more rock-based photo texturing for this. So yeah, it should be fun, and we'll just dive right back into it.